Moses was a really loving, gentle man.
I talk to Dennis every day. I tell him how proud I am to be his sister and how lucky I was to have been loved by him.
Because when I think about my brother, I have to think about him in that inferno.
I have to hope, and I live in hope that there will be change, because if I lose that hope, what then? It has to be our loved one's legacy, that there will be change, that people are punished.
What did you make of the report today when you read it through?
So the report for me answers quite a lot of the questions that not only I have, but I'm sure quite a lot of the bereaved and the survivors had as well. For me, the fact that Sir Martin Morbick named the corporations and various individuals that are responsible for the shoddy workmanship that they were proud of, even though they knew of the devastation that would occur should a fire occur. So for me, the Sir Martin Morbick, what he did was he put into the arena that these people, these decision makers, these corporations need to be held accountable.
So important for you.
Very important.
And what about you?
For me, the significance of today's report means that we have finally seen in black and white the failures. It's recorded the truth, the failures, the lack of actions, wrong decision making, the lack of human life, regard for human life, which is why 72 people died.
And he also mentions the greed, which I've always, with every interview I've ever done, or anything I've ever said on Grenfell, that is all these corporations had in mind when they took on that project.
I agree. It should never ever have been about financial gain. You can't put a price on human lives. It should never have been about the costs or financial gain.
Or the cost cutting?
Yes.
So the report has come. It has been a long, hard road for all of the families, the bereaved, the survivors. What needs to happen now?
For me, what needs to happen is, like I said, these corporations need to be held accountable. They were dishonest, which is said in the report. They focused purely on profit, and they need to feel the pain that they have caused to all of us bereaved and survivors. They will never understand the trauma that now is in our lives for the rest of our lives. And they need to somehow feel that pain.
For us, we've been given a life sentence of pain, sorrow and trauma. And because of losing our loved ones in such an horrific way, for those responsible, they need to be held accountable in a criminal court and face severe sentences. And the sentences need to reflect the magnitude of their actions or inactions.
You want accountability, the companies, what about the council, the tenant management organisation?
The tenant management organisation failed the tenants of Grenfell Tower. They basically saw them in a way that they dehumanised the tenants to the degree that the tenants were not listened to. They were very aggressive towards the tenants, who, by the way, were paying rent, and just had a total lack of disrespect for those tenants, which is why they went ahead with this project knowing that they shouldn't have ever touched Grenfell Tower, and if they were going to proceed with the project, there should not have been the cost cutting and the cheap cladding that they put up on that building.
They were basically treated like second-class citizens, that they should have been grateful that they were given social housing, and they were treated like that from start to finish, all of those that lived in Grenfell Tower.
This idea that they didn't deserve any more than they got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's how they were spoken to. I know personally my brother had lots of problems with the TMO. Yeah, and he quite often spoke to us about it.
And just in terms of the culture, it's repeated in the report that, you know, the people who were going to live in the refurbished tower almost didn't matter. That needs to change, doesn't it?
It does, and that's why the recommendations that have been put forward by Martin Morbick needs to be implemented. And the new Labour government now need to look at that report and put in these regulations and recommendations in order that another Grenfell never happens again.
How optimistic are you that you will get justice?
It's great, the recommendations, but if they're not acted upon, they mean nothing. From phase one and the recommendations, I think the only organisation so far that has taken on board all the recommendations they were given were the London Fire Brigade. And it shows, because of all the fires that have happened since Grenfell, nobody's lost their lives because they've implemented all of the recommendations.
So change can happen,
yes,
and lives can be saved. But it means everyone accepting the recommendations. It means everyone changing how they do things.
Exactly that. And that's the responsibility of the now Labour government to make sure that that happens.
And are you confident, either of you, both of you, that there will be change, that there will be justice?
For me, I have to hope, and I live in hope that there will be change, because if I lose that hope, what then? It has to be our loved one's legacy, that there will be change, that people are punished.
I totally agree with what Anne just said. You know, the recommendations mean nothing unless they're implemented.
And that legacy is important, isn't it?
Oh,
it is.
Yes.
Our loved ones, both my brother and Anne's brother, died in a horrific way. My Moses was cremated in that building. And so for me, justice is not just to remember that horrific morning but also for the legacy that should be left and introduced by the now Labour government with the recommendations to stop these corrupt corporations from dealing with social housing or any form of housing in the way in which they do.
You talk about legacy for both your brothers. Today must be phenomenally difficult. Every day must be difficult. But what are your thoughts about them today?
Moses was a really loving, gentle man. And he would protect anybody that he saw as family. Moses himself didn't have very much. That is in the way of assets. But whatever he had, he would share with anybody that he came into contact with. And everybody in that tower knew him for that reason, because he was a giver and a protector. And what's happened with this tragedy is that it blocks some of the good memories I have of Moses because of the trauma behind it all. Because when I think about my brother, I have to think about him in that inferno. And like I said before, all because of the corruption within the construction industry.
And what do you want to say about your brother Dennis?
Well, my most standout memory of Dennis was how much he loved us and cared for us. Again, he didn't have he didn't have financial wealth, but he was so rich in a human nature that was selfless, caring, loving, and you can't buy that. I remember him I talk to Dennis every day. I tell him how proud I am to be his sister. Yeah, I tell him how proud I am to be his sister and how lucky I was to have been loved by him.
I hope once the government have had an opportunity to read and digest the report, they implement all the recommendations.
The road's still long for us. The next stage is the criminal prosecutions. And they're obviously, that's so important to us now.